welcome or welcome back to another video. My name is Steph, and I've fallen a little bit behind in my uploads and realized that it's almost April and I still haven't filmed my April wrap-up, and I read some really good books that I'm looking forward to sharing with you. So let's get straight into them. First book that I read in February is The Maniac. So this is a fictionalized history and triptych. Part one is concerned with a mathematician who escapes Germany with his child during World War II. Part two is following John von Neumann during his time at the Manhattan Project and his peers that were working around him while they developed the atomic bomb and the H-bomb. And then part three is about we're gonna be starting to forget, Chinese game called Go. And the sort of theme that is stringing all of those things together is this examination of this guy's life, because he created one of the first computers and game theory, and then kind of connecting that to like the emergence of AI, etc. So I am going to be very upfront. I did not love it. I didn't hate it. I did not hate this book in any way. As somebody who reads quite a lot of fiction and someone who reads quite a lot of science and like historical research-oriented kind of documents, this sort of fictionalized history was trying to bridge the sort of in-between of both of those things, and I just read like a string of facts with random interviews of people who were like around John von Neumann or whoever else. The points that were trying to be made would have been maybe achieved a little bit better for me if it was just a straight up nonfiction. That being said, he did a great job of explaining like some of the physics and mathy stuff that came up in a really accessible way. But just for me, like if you're gonna put the effort into fictionalizing something, it should have a narrative. It should have a certain amount of emotional depth that I did not find in this. I didn't connect with it. So that's The Maniac. I think that it's probably a great book for certain readers. I just discovered that I was not one of them. After that, I did a reread of Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and oh my god, I love this book so much. This is one of my favorite books ever, but I hadn't reread it for probably at least 10 years. And I was really pleased to see that it held up to the memory that I have of it. I think I'm going to continue just reading through the whole series, but quick synopsis for you. This is a thriller that follows two main characters. One is Mikhail Blomkvist, and the other one is Elizabeth Salander. Mikhail is a journalist who has been kind of disgraced and lost his position in his own company because he published some information about a very powerful, very rich man that was not backed up very well. He's kind of going to be in the financial hole very, very quickly, and he gets a job offer from this older rich man who lives in like northern Sweden. And he offers Mikhail the job of writing his autobiography, but what he actually wants him to do is try to solve a cold case. So I think it's in the 60s or 70s, this older man's niece went missing, and this was like super tragic. He had a really good relationship with her. Just one day she was gone, and he kind of suspects multiple members of his own family. It was a little bit of a locked room situation, like they were all kind of trapped on this island. She went missing. What happened to her? Elizabeth Salander is a hacker, a punk, and a ward of the state. She gets pulled into solving the mystery and has kind of a difficult, traumatic past of her own that kind of ties into some of the main themes of the book. The book was originally titled Men Who Hate Women, which is a very accurate title. You do want to check content warnings because really this whole series kind of addresses gender-based violence and some of the legal system in Sweden, while also being an excellent thriller. Yeah, I just really enjoyed it, and I forgot how much of this book has to do with Nazism in Sweden, which was also really interesting to kind of revisit, because I think when people think about Nazis, they think about Germany, obviously, but there was, a bit of support in Sweden as well, and some of the family members were like very well-known supporters of Hitler in the book way back. So after that, I want to mention actually a very short story that I read on Uncanny Magazine. That is The Cook by C.L. Clarke. This is just wonderfully written. I think I came across it when I was listening to an episode of Writing Excuses, because I think they do a little bit of a deep dive and use it as an example for some of the things that they're talking about. But anybody should read it. You don't have to listen to the podcast episode, just read the book. It is following the relationship from a warrior who has returned from war and always goes to this sort of tavern place and has a relationship with the cook there. If I'm remembering properly, it is queer and only like 1,000 words. The prose is beautiful. If you want to be just absorbed completely by something for 5 minutes, I will link it down below. Please give it a try. The next book that I have to talk about is one that I loved for the first 98%. And then something happened at the end that ruined it for me. That is Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. So I don't usually care for books where we are getting flashbacks between when they were children and the future. I appreciate a second chance romance where everybody is kind of an adult and making adult decisions. But these two, I was kicking my feet with how cute this book was, which does not happen for me despite how much romance I actually end up reading. So this is following Macy and Elliot. They become friends when they are younger teenagers, when Macy moves in next door to Elliot at a summer house. So she spends 50% of her time there. And they have this incredible bond over reading and books. The guy in this makes me so stressed just because he is super honest and upfront and blunt and will just say exactly what he is thinking, even if it makes things incredibly uncomfortable. But that works for Macy. It makes them really compatible. The book flips between them and the present day when they are encountering each other again for the first time in many years, in the past. So they're kind of falling in love with each other in both timelines as you slowly move towards the end. There's this kind of mystery of what happened to break them up? What did Elliot do? And yeah, just because it was super fast chapters, I moved through it super fast. I loved every second, and then I came to the point of what happened. I'm not going to spoil anything, but just the way that it was done made it feel like something that I hate, even though once I calmed down a bit, I was so pissed off when this happened. When I calmed down a bit and I had time to think about it and look on Reddit about how other people were processing this book 10 years ago or whenever it came out, that gave me a bit more perspective of okay, I see what they were trying to do, but because it was never fully unpacked or addressed, to me, it just felt bad. As in, I could not justify them in my own mind getting together. Yeah, that's kind of all I can say about it, except that I think if it was written today, I actually think that they would have done it in a really different way. I think they would have addressed it and unpacked it and explored it completely differently, just because of how our world has changed, hopefully. So if you have read this and you have feelings or thoughts about the ending, I would really like you to leave a comment and tell me how you experienced or processed it, what you thought. Because I still have such conflicted feelings about it because I really, really loved it. I thought it was going to be one of my favorite romances ever, except for that one page or those last couple of pages. Let me know what you think. Love and Other Words. So after that, I read The Starling House. This is by Alex E. Harrow, who I've been having a bit of a marathon with in the last couple of months. I really enjoy her writing. So this is set in this spooky kind of small town in Kentucky. And it's a mining town, which was home to a writer named Eleanor Starling. Eleanor Starling wrote this really famous book called The Underland that had a lot of people kind of confused and intrigued, and there's a lot of speculation about, especially because after that she disappeared. The only person now remaining that lives in the Starling House, which is this, sort of spooky old Gothic style Victorian mansion, is Arthur. And he never goes into the town. He is a complete shut-in. We are following, however, Opal, and she lives in a hotel that's kind of run down. She's just trying to keep her life together by whatever means are necessary. And so one day she actually gets hired to be a cleaner for Arthur. Obviously, while she's there, she gets to know Arthur a little bit. Things become a little bit romantic, and all of these secrets come to light about the house, the town, and Eleanor Starling's work. I had a really fun time reading this. Basically, if you are looking for a Gothic style haunted house, creepy house novel, this might be one you want to check out. I think there was a really interesting discussion around capitalism that was happening, just because this is a mining town and there's like a lot of other characters and things that are kind of happening in the background. I almost wish that that was a bigger part of the story, just because I was really, really curious about it. But yeah, that is Starling House. I can't really say anything else about this, actually spoiling it, so Starling House. Following that, I finished reading a book called The Serpent and the Goddess. This has had the shit beat out of it, also because I bought it on eBay. So occasionally I am hit with kind of weird, obscure interests and then want to read absolutely everything on that weird, obscure interest. And so what kind of had me by the throat earlier this year was the symbolism of like women, snakes, and like divinity or like goddesses, and colonialism in Ireland. Then somehow I came across this book. I don't even remember how. I feel like it was published in like the 80s. So in terms of current accuracy and like relevance to, you know, the state of academic literature or thought today, that's not why I read it, okay? I was just really curious about the content. This is tracing female goddesses in Ireland over time and how attitudes and their role within society changed. Starting from like pre-Celts, Celts, the Brits, how the introduction of Christianity changed that as well. Syncretism versus like deliberate change being kind of forced upon people in this increasingly patriarchal environment. And I thought it was really interesting. For some quick background, Mary Condren, I believe, works in feminist political theology. And we know that I love a book with excellent notes and citations, and this has that. A+. After that, I read a graphic novel. This was recommended to me by one of you in the comments on one of my older videos, Eliza the Earthling. Thank you very much, Eliza. I had so much fun reading this. So this is a very short graphic novel that is following garlic. Garlic is among a bunch of sentient vegetables who all work with this witch who sell things at farmers markets. And somewhere nearby there is this sort of castle that is abandoned, and then they start seeing smoke coming from the chimney. They think that it must be a vampire. And so what are they gonna do but send garlic, because it's supposed to repel vampires, to go investigate. This was just super cute and cozy. I think I read it in like one read, and especially the beginning was really funny. I loved the vampire character. I loved the relationship between them and garlic, and yeah, garlic and the vampire. If you need a little graphic novel, pick me up. There you go. Then I read You Let Me In. This was on my TBR for a little while, and then I kind of forgot about it, and then Elizabeth from A Literary Princess recommended it. I also loved this book. Thank you, Elizabeth. I will link her channel down below. She has got tons of great recommendations. You Let Me In is following the life of a romance author who goes missing. But 99% of the book is her nieces who inherit her stuff, reading this final letter or like journal or memoir kind of piece of, and they have to read it because she's embedded some password or something in there that they have to find in order to receive the full inheritance of all of her wealth and splendor or whatever. This book details her life and her relationship with a fairy. Nothing about the back cover said there was going to be fairies in it. Fairies of very much a holly black, dark, kind of spooky, but also sort of traditional variety from the time that she was a child. And it's kind of an abusive relationship, kind of a dark, twisted, kind of romantic thing. And basically I would sum this book up as My Dark Vanessa meets Holly Black. Messed up combination, but it worked so well. I loved it. Could go on one of my favorite reads of the year. We'll see. I don't know, but it has definitely been one of those books that lingers with me. It's just spooky enough and disturbing enough. I think it's kind of like poking at and unpacking some sort of important issues, but you might want to check content warnings for that one as well. Obviously, My Dark Vanessa's content warning enough for you. After that, I decided to try a historical romance. I picked up The Duke Gets Even. Don't let the cover turn you off. This book was great. I am always hesitant to pick up historical romances largely because of the cover. Like, I don't love the illustrated cartoon sort of covers of contemporary romance necessarily either, but the historical covers, I just expect to get Bodice Ripper and something super dated, like where the heroine is gonna have purple eyes and like a really tiny little bird-like frame and no agency. But this is not that, okay? So this is set during the Golden Age / turn of the century. The guy is very much Downton Abbey energy. He's a British guy who's trying to marry American money, so he's gone to the US because he needs their money to maintain his status quo. She's an Irish American who has some ties to an Irish gang, but she's also quite wealthy. So she kind of walks the edge of being on the fringe of society, but also being in society. But ultimately, she's not interested in romance. She just wants to garden and fight the Comstock laws, which was an interesting subplot that I was not expecting. But for that alone, I'm going to recommend this book to absolutely everybody who is interested in reading romance or wants something that's a little bit different and is getting tired of carbon copy romances. But anyway, back to the plot. They meet when they're both night swimming. She approaches him thinking he's someone totally different, realizes that is not who she was wanting to feel up. And then, of course, they run into each other the next day, and she realizes that he is engaged to her friend. That doesn't last very long at all because he's having a real hard time nailing someone down. They start off kind of antagonistic, but eventually end up in sort of a fake dating type of relationship and possibly fall in love. What I liked about this is that she's feminist in a way that suits our time and like what I think contemporary readers are looking for, but also makes sense for her historical context and her life. Because that's the other thing I don't tend to always like with historical romances that I think that this does really, really well, is that it's not putting contemporary characters in a historical context just to make things wacky. Can I just say it was great and then you go read it and then tell me you liked it too? That would be really nice. Thank you. Finally, the last book that I read during February was Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I have spent probably 10 years being convinced that I read this book, but I think I actually read Ranger's Apprentice when I was like 10 years old, and different books, completely different. So Assassin's Apprentice is following the life of Fitz. He is the bastard son of a prince. So if you've read kind of older style fantasies, you know how this goes. The first book is when he's a child and he's going through all of this training and experiencing this real coming of age arc and coming into who he is, his confidence, his magic, all of that. So he's training to become a royal assassin and one of the king's most trusted allies. This has a really interesting magic system. One of them is called Wit, which, you know, involves a bunch of like telepathic communication and influence and stuff. And there's another one that is inherited from Fitz's mother, and I have pulled a blank on what it is called, but essentially he is able to build this kind of telepathic connection with animals. So he can like see out of their eyes and they have like this special relationship, but this is really frowned upon by the current society because they say that you can go insane by doing this and that this is actually very dangerous, but it's very hard for Fitz to resist. I loved it. It was really good. It's been a long time since I've read an older fantasy, and I think that I really want to continue the trend. I'll continue the series, obviously. I think this is a trilogy, but there's just so many fantastic and sort of famous modern classics, I guess, that are not necessarily being talked about on BookTube, and so I kind of forget about them a lot of the time. I'm really glad that I picked up some Robin Hobb. Had a very Tamara Pierce kind of feel to me, which I love, obviously. Yeah, I want to get into like Daughter of the Forest, Wizard of Earthsea. I don't know what else, but I'm gonna find out and I'm gonna read them. But that brings me to the end of this video. If you have any suggestions for me, especially if they are some of the older fantasies that, you know, maybe people aren't talking about as much anymore, let me know in the comments. I would really like to hear your thoughts and to read them. If you've read any of the books that I read this month, let me know what your thoughts are on those as well, especially Love and Other Words and that ending. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day or evening, wherever, whenever you are, and I'll see you again soon in another video. Bye!